Rein in your excitement, we still have one more servant left to cover before the Apocrypha event, and this one is a real dark horse. Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here, with a servant spotlight for the Greek stallion himself, Chiron. We'll be examining his stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize him effectively, and an overall grade, comparing him to how he stacks up to the other 4-star servants. Now, on to Chiron's stats. Chiron has a max HP of 12,250 and a max attack of 9,294, which becomes 8,829 thanks to his Archer class modifier. For a 4-star Archer, he has very high HP, but his attack is fairly low. Likewise, compared to all the other 4 stars as a whole, Chiron's HP stat is top tier, while his attack is just about average or slightly below. Chiron's stat spread heavily favors defense, which works best for supports and tanks. Taking a look at his skills, Chiron's first skill is Mind's Eye True, rank A, which applies evade to himself for 1 turn and increases his defense between 10 and 20% for 3 turns, depending on level. His second skill is Dedication of the Immortal, rank EX. It increases the crit strength of all allies for 3 turns between 30 and 50% and grants between 5 and 15 crit stars, both depending on level. However, it does cost 500 HP as a demerit. And finally, his last skill is Wisdom of the Divine Gift, rank A+. It increases the Arts, Quick, and Buster card effectiveness of an ally for 3 turns between 20 and 30% depending on level. For his passives, Chiron has Magic Resistance rank B, which increases his debuff resist by 17.5%, Independent Action rank A, which increases his crit strength by 10%, and Divinity rank C, which applies damage plus 150 to all his attacks. As for his deck and Noble Phantasm, Chiron has a Quick Arts deck with Quick, Arts Buster, and an Arts Noble Phantasm. His Noble Phantasm Antares Snipe removes all defensive buffs from a single enemy, and also deals significant damage to them with between a 900 and 1500% damage modifier, depending on level, and also decreases their critical hit rate for 3 turns between 20 and 60%, depending on overcharge. Taking a closer look at his cards, we see that his Quick card hits 3 times, his Arch hits 3 times, his Buster hits 4 times, and his extra attack hits 5 times. He has an NP gain rate of 0.68% and a star rate of 8.1%. He has some very good NP gain from the double Arch cards and high hit counts, and also slightly above average star generating for the same reasons. Chiron may not be as popular and flashy as his students, but you should never underestimate one of history's greatest teachers. Although he has a pretty low attack stat, Chiron is extremely durable with a ton of HP to compensate. His NP gain is also no joke. He may not be able to NP spam, but he is capable of NPing at least a couple of times in a battle all on his own. And to top it off, he even does a fairly good job of star generating thanks to his plentiful hit counts. So he isn't as bad as his initial stats may suggest. But what really elevates Chiron is his flexibility and powerful skill set. Right off the bat, he has an incredible support buff in his third skill, Wisdom of the Divine Gift. This skill boosts the effectiveness of all card types for a selected ally for 3 whole turns. This skill is very similar to Helena's Search for the Unknown, which is an already great skill, except this one is a little bit more powerful in exchange for being single target. Chiron can choose to use this on himself to give his attacks a little bit more power, or he can use it on an ally to not only increase their power, but also their NP gain and their star generating, which makes this an incredibly versatile skill and one of the best tools in Chiron's kit. But it's far from the only tool, as Chiron has another powerhouse skill in Dedication of the Immortal, which is a 50% crit buff and star bomb on an incredibly short cooldown. It does cost 500 HP to activate this skill, but given Chiron's already large HP pool and the huge boost that this skill gives your team's DPS, the demerit is easily worth it. If you need a reference to see how good this skill really is, it's the equivalent of giving Waver's crit buff to the whole party. Offensive skills aside, Chiron also has a nice defensive skill in Mind's Eye, which gives him evade and a decent defense buff to further build upon his tankiness. When it comes to skill order, I recommend going for Dedication of the Immortal first for the overall buff to your team's DPS, followed by Wisdom of the Divine Gift for utility, and then Evade last. And if you aren't going for a crit team, then you can level Wisdom of the Divine Gift first instead. Chiron's support capability doesn't just stop at his skills though. His NP is also quite handy. It's a single target arts attack that decreases an enemy's crit chance and also removes all defensive buffs from that enemy. Despite this being ostensibly an offensive Noble Phantasm, the damage that it deals is mediocre and hardly worth mentioning. Likewise, the overcharge effect of decreasing crit chance is nice, but not that important. The real selling point is the extra effect of removing enemy defensive buffs. Whether the enemy has one defensive buff or 100, or they have guts or evade or invincibility, this Noble Phantasm will remove all of it. Meaning that not only does Chiron's Noble Phantasm never miss, but all Noble Phantasms and attacks following it will always hit too. And as I mentioned earlier, Chiron has no issues with NP gain, which makes this kind of utility invaluable in challenge quests and boss fights where enemies rely heavily on stacking defense buffs or spamming guts and invincibility. So as you can see, Chiron has a nifty set of support skills that can really help out just about any team. And when I say any team, I mean it. One of Chiron's best traits is that none of his buffs discriminate based on card type. Wisdom of the Divine Gift is basically a targetable projection that buffs all cards, and his Noble Phantasm and crit buffs work just as well on any servant, which makes Chiron one of the rare supports that can easily slide into any team composition, Buster, Quick, or Arts, and still be very effective, not unlike Waver. Also not unlike Waver, Chiron makes for one of the best crit supports in the game. His second skill alone can fuel the crit DPS engine for an entire team due to its big numbers and high uptime. His star generating, while not amazing, is also still better than most servants, and his deck makes him especially useful for teams that lack strong traditional crit support like Arts teams. Chiron is no slouch defensively either. His high HP and evade give him good enough survivability to survive late game fights without the need of a dedicated defensive support. And if it comes down to it, Chiron can output some DPS of his own, as he does have a single target NP and his buffs can be used on himself. That said though, he is no Nero Bride, so unless you're building him as your team's dedicated crit servant, his damage is lackluster. Even more so than other offensive support servants, as he has no NP upgrade and only one Buster card. And while we're on the topic of weaknesses, Chiron's Achilles heel is unfortunately his own class. As an archer, he has abnormally high star weight, which is the worst possible thing for a crit support to have, as he will steal a hefty amount of stars from your more powerful servants. And his star generating is not quite good enough to compensate for that. Thankfully, when it comes to team comps for Chiron though, your choices are wide and varied. He can fit into most teams regardless of card type and still provides significant buffing and utility. As mentioned, offensive crit servants benefit the most from Chiron's support, so crit-based damage dealers like Saberlot, Emiya, and Ku Prototype are perfect. Both Ku and Saberlot have high uptime star absorb skills, so Chiron's star weight isn't as much of an issue when he supports them. And in Saberlot's case, he's also capable of generating stars on his own. Emiya also has a very high star weight similar to Chiron, and when his Hawkeye is combined with Chiron's crit buff, Emiya has a ridiculously strong 3-turn 150% buff to crit damage. Other than offensive crit servants, it also helps to pair Chiron with other crit supports who can supplement his own buffs and provide additional star generating like Osakabe Hime, Caster Gil, and Salieri. After her buff, Osakabe Hime becomes one of the premier crit supports in the game, and she does a great job of helping teams with additional damage buffs and healing that Chiron can't provide. Additionally, Caster Gil is one of the best arch crit supports around, and Chiron benefits a lot from his star generating buff. Salieri is another solid option as well, thanks to his good star generating with Innocent Monster. Chiron's Bondcraft Essence is teaching and learning. It buffs the arch and quick card effectiveness of all allies by 10%. This is very good to have if you're supporting an arch or quick team. Otherwise, you can use other craft essences that help with star generating, like Seaside Luxury, 2030, His Rightful Place, and Heading Towards Treefoss. These will all help with crit consistency. If you want to go the rogue route and make Chiron your team's DPS, then you can use craft essences that are going to buff crit damage, like Gem Magecraft, Dress for Demons, Castle of the Sun, and Knight's Pride. Chiron's defensive buff makes up for the demerit on Knight's Pride, so it does work pretty well on him. In the future, I recommend using an army marches on its stomach, which is fantastic for increasing Chiron's damage as well as his star generating and NP gain. Overall, Chiron is one of the best offensive support hybrid servants available. He provides incredible damage to any crit team due to his strong team-wide crit buff. His projection-like third skill gives him the flexibility to work in nearly any team comp. He is one of the tankier 4 stars, and his Noble Phantasm is a game changer for most boss fights and tougher content, so Chiron only gets better as the game goes on. However, Chiron's own damage is a bit on the weaker end, especially his Noble Phantasm, and as an archer, he has a bad habit of stealing crit stars, which does hurt the team's damage consistency. All in all, Chiron gets an A- from me. If he got an NP buff or a skill that decreased his star weight, I think Chiron would be in a much better spot, but even without it, he is still a top tier servant and definitely someone you want on your team if you plan on seriously using any kind of crit servant. And those are my thoughts on Chiron. I know many people consider Achilles to be the prize of the Apocrypha gacha, but Chiron is far better than just a consolation. But I'm interested to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.